Okay, let's talk about a phrase that you are hearing everywhere right now, large language model. For anyone who works in higher ed assessment, once you really strip away all the hype and frankly all the panic, these tools start to look surprisingly familiar. So in this explainer, we're going to give you the one translation that usually makes it all just click.
So here's the plan. First, we'll get clear on what an LLM actually is. Then, we'll reframe it using a really powerful analogy that's perfect for assessment professionals. We'll take a quick, gentle peek under the hood. Then, we'll explore its role as your new co-pilot. And we'll wrap it all up by looking at what this all really means for the future of our work.
All right, let's dive right in. To really get your head around what a large language model is, it's actually way more helpful to start with what it is not.
And here's the core of it. An LLM is not intelligent. Not in the way a person is, anyway. It doesn't understand the meaning behind words, it doesn't reason through a problem, and it has absolutely zero goals or intentions. What it does have is this: just extraordinary talent for prediction. Think of it as a statistical engine that does one thing. It finds and reproduces patterns in language.
And this is the crucial point. Everything you see an LLM do, whether it's writing an email or summarizing a dense research paper, it all comes from this one incredibly simple objective, just repeated on an absurd planetary scale. It is always just asking itself, okay, given this string of words, what is the most statistically probable next word? That's it.
Now, let's try to frame this in a way that's actually useful for the kind of work we do every day. Let's think of an LLM as a kind of superpowered predictive rubric. Just imagine for a second that you could feed a machine every single relevant document from our world. I'm talking millions of student papers, every syllabus, every rubric, every piece of feedback we've ever written. Then you throw in research articles, all the institutional policies, heck, even the minutes from every single committee meeting.
Okay, so after processing all of that, what does the model actually learn? Well, it doesn't learn pedagogy. It doesn't learn the why. What it does is implicitly learn the statistical patterns in how we talk about learning. It learns the shape of disciplinary language, common argument structures, even the specific kind of nerdy phrasing we use that's shaped by things like Bloom's taxonomy. So when you ask it to draft the learning outcome, it's not sitting there thinking about educational theory. Nope, it's just drawing on a compressed statistical memory of how thousands and thousands of humans have written them before. There's no consciousness, there's no intent, it's just extremely fancy autocomplete. So how in the world does this fancy autocomplete actually work? Let's take that quick, non-technical look under the hood to see how the engine is built. It's really just a four-step dance. First, something called tokenization chops up all the text into little pieces. Then, embeddings turns those pieces into numbers, into vectors that capture their meaning based on context. Third, and this is the secret sauce, a process called attention lets the model figure out which previous words are the most important for predicting what comes next. And finally, prediction. It just calculates the odds and picks the most likely next piece. And then the whole thing just starts over, again and again. And this embeddings part is where the real magic happens. This is the mathematical trick that makes sure related concepts actually stick together. So, in the model's huge numerical map of all of human language, the word assessment is mathematically much closer to evaluation than it is to say banana, which is, a good thing.
Okay, so that's the theory. How does the statistical prediction engine actually become a useful co-pilot for us in our day-to-day work? Well, because so much of what we do in assessment is so deeply linguistic and full of patterns, LLMs are just uncannily good at these kinds of tasks. They can whip up a solid first draft of learning outcomes. They can summarize thousands of qualitative student comments in seconds, suggest codes for open-ended responses. They're brilliant first draft machines and incredible synthesis engines.
But, and this is a really big but, they completely fall apart on things that require human judgment and verification. They have no idea about your institution's specific context, they can't verify facts, they don't get subtle policy constraints, and they're absolutely terrible at making causal claims because all they see is correlation in language, not cause and effect out in the real world. And this brings us to probably the single most important mental model you can have for this technology. It is not an autopilot that you can just set and forget. It is a co-pilot. It is there to assist the expert, and that's you, who is still and must remain firmly in command.
And as a copilot, it comes with some serious risks that you have to manage. LLMs can hallucinate, which is just a fancy way of saying they make stuff up, and they do it with complete and utter confidence. They absolutely reflect the biases that were in their training data. And critically, they are always optimizing for what sounds plausible, not for what is actually correct.
I absolutely love this summary. Think of them as brilliant research assistants who never need a coffee break, but who will also, from time to time, invent sources with absolute certainty. And what that means is that human review, governance, and good old-fashioned methodological rigor, well, they matter more now than they ever have.
So let's zoom out and put this all together. What is the most productive way to think about this powerful but very flawed new technology in higher education?
This slide, I think, illustrates the new assessment stack just perfectly. Look how the roles are divided. Humans, that's us. We are absolutely irreplaceable for defining values, setting standards, and providing interpretation. The LLMs, they become these powerful accelerators for all that linguistic heavy lifting, the drafting, the summarizing, the pattern finding, and of course, traditional analytics are still crucial to validate and quantify everything.
And when we use LLMs this way, we're not automating our jobs away. Not at all. We are amplifying our own expertise. We're essentially handing off the clerical, cognitive grunt work to the machine, which frees up our time for the uniquely human parts of assessment, judgment, strategy, and driving meaningful improvement.
Ultimately, that's what these tools are. They're mirrors. They reflect back to us the patterns of how we communicate, how we evaluate, and how we teach. Working with them isn't about replacing our expertise. It's about learning to conduct this strange new cognitive orchestra, one that, if we use it thoughtfully, might just make our work faster, deeper, and somehow even more human.